It's my feel-good breakfast show.
A very good morning to you. It's a Friday. It's the 3rd of February 2023. A time right now for us to take a closer look at another week's headlines that we thought, of course, we'd be starting up the conversations around those water coolers, news stories trending, of course, on social media pages and front pages of newspapers all across South Africa. And we're back with seasoned news editor Roi Simpson as we discuss some of the biggest headlines that have got the nation buzzing. Of course, you're welcome to join us in the discussion by sharing your thoughts via WhatsApp on that voice note line 063 408 8863. So on Tuesday, the ANC called for state of disaster laws to be utilized to end load shedding by December. Now, many are skeptical about this move, with the critics arguing that the measure will undermine spending controls and isn't really the solution to the nation's energy crisis. So I guess the question here, with the army being deployed to Eskom stations as part of the of Operation Prosper, BRICS has agreed to also into discussions to assist with blackouts. So why are we calling this now a state of disaster?
Well, it is a disaster.
It has been for a while,
on a daily basis. Certainly for business, it's a disaster. So objectively, that's true. You referred to the boots on the ground, the army being around these power stations. They're not doing that much. What they might be doing is preventing like outright sabotage of the systems. That might be happening. But it's not like they're contributing in any other way to restoring the power generation. The BRICS deal, well, there isn't really a deal. There's lots of people talking about how they are going to help us. But I couldn't find any specifics anywhere of exactly how they would help us and how that would happen at speed either. So I think that this is being done because it allows you to leapfrog over legislation.
Declaring it a state of disaster.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you can work your way quickly around legislative hurdles, and then the other issue is money. Isn't it always? The state of disaster allows you to free up a lot of money from within the fiscus and just move it around conveniently to wherever you want it to be. And that's very handy. So now you've got speed of movement in terms of dodging the legal loopholes, plus you've got access to the money.
And actually to the purse that might be designated for that specific purpose, a state of disaster, which I'm sure that we have somewhere in the background there for each department.
No, it kind of gets repurposed from within the budget. But there are rules on how government spends its money. You and I might wonder about that on a daily basis, but they're there, and the state of disaster allows you to circumvent those rules.
So we've also seen looting happening quite rampantly throughout this time. Do you think that this is being exacerbated by what's happening in terms of load shedding, and is this another response to the state of disaster that we're seeing?
This issue of looting is a huge one, because while that speed of movement and the access to the funding is great for solving problems quickly, we've also seen during COVID-19 massive temptation to just steal the money. When there are 224 government officials who've been recommended for disciplinary action over about 150 billion rands worth of COVID-19 spending that has question marks around it. And my real concern with this one is I know that Bloomberg Media just the other day reported that we've approached Car Powership, that Turkish company that wants to park ships off the coast, use natural gas to create electricity. They've approached them now for 800 megawatts in a 3-month time frame. But all of this is facing huge obstacles. The original deal was completely squashed. Now it's coming back for review. March the 7th, they're going to either get or not get environmental clearance. And since they just went and changed the numbers and went, oh no, we'd used bad numbers last time, they could fail there. Barbara Creasy might not approve it. And the court case that Outers got against them, all they handed out was redacted information. So half the information in this document for how they got to this decision, it's just missing. So they could lose that court case. So this feels, the state of disaster feels like it might be the key to circumvent all of that and push that deal through for, we don't know, anything up to 200 billion rand.
Yeah. You know, Roy, as you were talking there, you mentioned, I think, a trigger word for all South Africans. You said billion, and when you said that, I could feel a collective shudder all throughout the country, which we will touch on in a second, of course, in some of the latest reports that we are about to be spending 1 billion rand on a very well-known Premier League football team. Is it justified? Is there a case to be made mathematically, economically? Is it perhaps maybe out of touch? What do you think about this? Send us your voice notes. 063 408 8863. We'll be back with Roy in a short.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Hey, welcome back. It's a Friday morning, and it is your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso, on S3, as we continue to discover what exactly is happening within the confines of our country and abroad as well, in terms of the news headlines all around. Of course, you would have heard right now about the billion rand, that potential deal to sponsor Tottenham Hotspur by the Department of Tourism. What is your opinion on that? We want to hear from you. 063 408 8863. In the meantime, let's tap into the mind of Roi Simpson, news editor. So where do we even begin with this? Is it a case of failure to communicate the right message? Because the acting CEO of South African Tourism, Themba Khumalo, came out yesterday, and the video was being circulated all around social media, where he made the case and said that this 1 billion is going to bring in 88 billion in revenue, create jobs, showcase our country, etc., etc. What do you think happened here?
Well, I know what happened is that the information was leaked before they were ready to present it to us. But there's no indication that they really were going to present this to us in any sort of calculated and well-planned way. And perhaps Themba was the wrong person to send out. He rubbed us up the wrong way. He came across as superior, as arrogant, and not wanting to be questioned about this. And that didn't feel good. That sort of raised an emotion of opposition towards him. Also, we've got load shedding, we've got this crisis, so any idea that we're spending vast amounts of money on anything that isn't fixing that, that sort of rubs us up the wrong way. Mm-hmm. But if you pare away the emotion and that response from it, the content of what he said, I don't know about that 88 billion rand number. That's one of those thumbsuck numbers. But what he did say is that Tottenham Hotspur enjoys a worldwide audience, a following on TV, of 616 million people.
This we know.
So having your logo on the side of their shirt means you're exposed for 3 years to 616 million people. And a side note, he said, is, okay, let's get 1% of those people to come visit us. That's 6 million people. And that might be where that number comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen it done before. Currently, the log leaders, Arsenal, are being sponsored by Rwanda, their tourism department. So let's talk about the fact that, I mean, still, it's an exorbitant amount of money. So do you think it was just a case of being out of touch with reality, not communicating at the right time? Well, we weren't even meant to know. Are there some internal politics, do you think, that are happening within South African tourism that are now rearing their ugly head and showing what's happening?
Judging by what the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee has been finding out about SA tourism, there's a lot of internal politics. Themba Khumalo is only an acting CEO, with the probability that he won't be made permanent. There's 16 positions in SA tourism that aren't filled. They account for 75% of the whole irregular spending within the tourism sector of government. So they're a problematic organization. I think the other thing about this is that this is 36% of their annual budget. It feels, it's a huge gamble to be taking that this little logo on the side of a shirt is somehow going to generate all these visitors.
What do you think are the chances of this actually happening?
The deal?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it'll probably go. There's a really good chance of it going through. There is logic to it, and I think a business case can be made for it. They just haven't made that business case. They haven't made it convincingly.
Yes.
But they've got time to spin this. They've got time to come to us and explain why this makes sense. And I think there's a very good chance it could go through.
Yeah, in keeping with the topic of money that makes the world go round amid one of the worst economic crises the UK has seen in years, it's been reported that the British Army is no longer regarded as a top-level fighting force, and this follows a warning by defence sources that budget cuts have seen the army decline in the eyes of the world. Now, for the unaware out there, how did this happen? How did the situation get so bad that even the military has been downscaled in terms of budgets?
Britain's got its own economic crises on its hands. It made terrible government decisions, Brexit, the way Boris Johnson's government spent money on COVID-19, Liz Truss's tax reforms. They've got all these issues that really put their economy in a tailspin where it is at the moment. But this issue of the status of the military and sort of its readiness as it stands, I mean, this has been growing for maybe 60 years. Sometime just after the Second World War, the mid-50s or so, once the Cold War settled in and they knew what the prospects were, they started get what they called the peace dividend, which was they dialed down their spending on the military and they dialed up their spending on social services, like health and things like that. And if you look at a graph, the social spending goes up and the military spending goes down, and they cross paths somewhere in the 80s, and that trend's continued.
Yeah.
So they've de-invested deliberately,
yes,
so that they could use that money for social programs. So, yeah, it's been a deliberate and conscious thing, and I think for the country, given the fact that it hasn't been engaged in a war, it was actually a great decision.
Yeah, and perhaps something that nations all around the world could take a lead from, and we'd see less devastation as caused by war all throughout the world as well. Well, among those headlines that we've just discussed, including the one that China has apparently brought about a super cow that can double its production of milk over its lifetime. There's so many things to discuss, and we'd love to hear from you as well on your opinions on these headlines. Do send us a voice note, 063-408-8863. Let us know on our social media platforms as well. And as always, Roy, thank you very much, sir.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. It is your Feel Good Breakfast show. One more time, a chance to hang out with Roi Simpson, news editor, to discuss some of the biggest news headlines of the past week. And we're still touching on what is happening in the United Kingdom right now with the, you call it the de-investment, as you've referred to it earlier on, in the army that has now rendered it not a top-class force in the world. What does this mean for its allies?
Well, its allies are the ones making this statement. It's in fact a nameless US general who's telling them that they have this military that's no longer looked at as top tier. It was
very British of you.
Apparently, yes. Not even barely second tier.
Wow.
And I don't know. I always distrust the American military when it comes to issues like this. They have far too cozy a relationship with the arms manufacturers and the military-industrial complex. Was the term coined by Eisenhower, I think, and that for me just puts a question mark there. Of the top 10 spenders in the world on military every year, America outspends the next 9.
Wow!
So they're used to just this massive military spending, and they're involved all over the world in military activities. So they expect their allies to they want their allies to play with. So I'm a little skeptical. I'm not sure that the status of the UK military really affects their allies that much. They've got NATO together.
All right, well, let's park that tank for a second and move over to the next story, where in other news, Chinese scientists have successfully cloned 3 super cows that can produce unusually high amounts of milk. State media reported this, hailing it as a breakthrough for Chinese dairy industry, and they're saying that these chosen animals are capable of producing some 18 tons of milk per year, or 100 tons over their lifetimes, and almost double the amount of an average cow. I guess the first question one might ask is, are there any safety issues with consuming milk from a cloned animal?
No, because you're making a carbon copy of a particular animal whose products we already consume. I don't see any health issues for humans at all. There might be health issues for the animals.
Right.
It's sort of an unnatural situation to be producing that much milk. I'm not sure if that has physical implications for them. If so, you're going to have lots of cows with the same physical problem. And you've also got to sort of expose yourself to a bit of a risk in that all of them have the same resistances to disease and also the same gaps where they're open to disease. So something particular could come into the herd and wipe out the entire herd in one shot because none of them have the resistance, for example.
I'm just wondering about a story we read this past week about a company wanting to give cows seaweed as a substitute for feed in order to reduce their methane production, which contributes towards climate change, and what the climate change and kind of advocates or activists would then say about the super cow. Do we know enough about it in terms of how much more methane would it produce? Is it physically bigger in size? Any of the aspects about this animal?
We don't know any of that. And to come back to your health issue, what we really worry about with animals and feed are things like the steroids and the antibiotics. Those are the things that come back to affect us.
Yeah.
So, no, that's all possible, and clearly they're working on a lot of things.
Yeah. From an ethical and moral point of view, are we facing anything that might change the future of humanity? I mean, the Chinese did clone the first Arctic wolf, right? Successfully. And now this is super cows. Are we now moving into that era where it is now no longer seen as kind of hindering our collective conscience and what it means to be humans and creators of life?
Well, that's the thing. The morality issue comes around playing God. and clearly they're quite advanced in their science. The idea that they might clone a human is quite believable at this stage, and that's the one that raises all those morality
Where
issues.
do we stop? Yes.
Personally, I don't have any issues there. Ethically, I have one little thing which niggles at the back of my mind, and that is with this Arctic fox, we might be doing ourselves and the Earth a disservice, because if we can do this, if we can replace these species that we're wiping out,
yes,
then it takes away the pressure to figure out a proper management strategy to make sure that doesn't happen. And it takes away all the impetus to, and we have to see animals as sentient beings. We have to find a way to live in harmony with them and to get a symbiosis going.
Yeah.
And if we short-circuit it this way and we find these ways to compensate for our own failures to do that, I'm afraid we're letting ourselves off the hook of what is a really noble pursuit for the human race as such.
Absolutely. And what does that do to our collective conscience and our ability to connect with nature and have empathy for the value that we place on things like the beauty of creation?
Correct.
Wow. Roy, thank you very much. As always, appreciate you. Of course, we'd love to hear from you as well. 063-408-8863. We'll keep that line open for your opinions on all of these headlines that we've discussed and more. Please do send them through.